I'm so glad you came out on a rainy Saturday. We didn't know. Thought it could just be me and Joel and John. Wouldn't have made any difference as far as the talk goes, but it's more fun when there are people here. I give the same talk anyhow. So, actually, John was saying before we started here that tomorrow is the 7th year anniversary the 10th year anniversary. It's the 7th year anniversary of the place I speak in LA. It's the 10th year anniversary of Vision tomorrow. And really, I started teaching and learning all of this metaphysical stuff in Terry Cole Whitaker Ministries back in 1984 at the El Cortez, downtown San Diego. So always this seems sort of like the hub for me of this whole New Thought movement. But the longer that I'm doing this, I've studied just about everything there is to study in this quasi-metaphysical, spiritual realm. I just keep simplifying and simplifying it. And so it's interesting that I brought this enormously huge Ernest Holmes book to read from today, because Ernest Holmes, of course, is the founder of religious science, which is what they now call them spiritual centers. But this is basically a church of religious science, but they don't say that anymore because it was confusing to people with Scientology, and all people got confused and all that stuff. So they took that, and now it's spiritual centers. But it's basically founded on religious science. And Ernest Holmes is probably, as far as all the people that I've studied, is the one that I relate the most to in terms of kind of the way he was and how very simple he makes everything. It's an extremely practical spirituality when you study Ernest Holmes. But what I love about this particular book is called the Ernest Holmes Papers, and it's too big to fucking carry around the way I like to carry books around, is that it's taken from his live talks. So you hear how irreverent he was, as I am. So when you sort of hear, as we'll read some of this today, you kind of hear the way he tortured people, the way I like to torture you. So it's kind of fun. But these big books just bug the crap out of me because I like to carry my books around and bring them here to read to you. Somebody gave me this great big hardbound book last week that's called Do You Quantum Think by this woman, Diane Collins. And so I went through it, and this was what was good. So I just tore out these pages and threw the rest of the book away so that I could tell you this stuff. I've started ripping books apart. You know, because it's easier to carry if you just get rid of all this, you know, because usually the first 10 pages tell you what the book is about, then they just fucking repeat themselves for hundreds of pages. But the reason this subject does not interest me at all, but I'm going to tell it to you. Because a lot of people are interested in this, and this woman in particular was interested in this, and I've had people ask about this a lot, and so I thought we would just sort of go over this as part of a broader subject. Because basically she does, it doesn't matter to me that I'm super fucking weird. I'm not trying to fit in anywhere. I'm not trying to get a seat at the adult table. I'm not trying to convince anybody. I don't publicize my work or try to get people to come. It's just here for people who are interested in this. But there are a lot of people who want to seem normal. I don't know why. But people want to seem normal and explain this stuff in a rational way. So they like these books that take science and quantum physics and talk about how all this stuff works because they feel like it makes it more valid. But I don't give a shit about that. But I'm going to read this for those who do, because some people do. To me, it's like it was this enormous book that tells you how your car works. Like, this is what the spark plugs do, and the battery does this, and the pistons do that, and I just want to teach you how to fucking drive. Like, you just get in and turn the key and go. Like, that's how I'm more interested in that. But this sort of explains some of this aspect of what we hear a lot of times in New Thought about how you create your own reality. So this is sort of the quantum way that we create our own reality. So we'll talk about that briefly, and then we'll go into the fun stuff, like how you actually do it, that it's fun. So this is basically what the whole book is about really, when you come right down to it, is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. So how many people are familiar with Heisenberg's uncertainty principle? Okay, so a few people. So this is the foreword that was written by somebody else, and then this is what was written by the actual woman, which comes down to basically Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. But this foreword is by Fred Alan Wolf, and what I liked was he just said it in such a really super clear way in terms of how what we focus on is really everything. Okay, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to skip around a little bit. The old adage, what you see is what you get, appears to apply to the world that we see all around us. However, we little appreciate that a different way of observing complementary to the adage exists. It states that what you see is what you expect. So we talk about that here all the time. In fact, I've told people before, I have a post-it on the mirror in my bathroom that says, what are you preparing for? What are you expecting? Because you will get what you're preparing for and what you're expecting. So a lot of people in the morning when they're getting ready for work are already expecting a chaotic day. This is not what our philosophy is about. Why are you studying all this shit if you're not doing it? Why call ye me Lord, Lord, and do not the things I say? Right? This is Jesus' frustration with the apostles was, why do you call me teacher and not listen to a fucking thing I say? He was always yelling at the apostles. They were idiots. And telling him, why do you keep asking me this stuff, then you don't do anything I say? So the idea is when you're getting up in the morning, watch your mind. Place a guard at the door of your mind, the early metaphysicians used to say. So you look, what am I expecting? What am I preparing for? If you're telling yourself things like, there's going to be a lot of traffic, that meeting's going to be really stressful, that's what you're preparing for, that's what you're expecting, and that's what you will see. That's basically what he's going to tell us about here, which is fabulous. To accomplish new thinking, we first need to look at how and why the world is not as it seems. This helps us grasp the quantum physics principles involved, particularly how observation changes the world. Next, we need to see how and where we lose our ability to think clearly and why this naturally occurs as a result of our desire for objective or out there stimulation. So the mind really wants there to be an objective reality that it can react to, but there is no objective reality. The mind wants to say, that's just the way it is, and I'm just responding to that. The only thing I can do is respond to, the world was the way it was when I got here. It has nothing to do with me. I'm just responding to it. And the mind wants that. But that's just not the way reality actually is. Okay? How different is the world of quantum physics from the everyday physical world that we experience with our normal conditioned senses? As a physicist, I have learned that it's very different. However, the difference may not be easily appreciated by non-scientists. The quantum physical worldview leads to observations often very dissimilar from the world we ordinarily see. Usually, the dissimilarity is difficult to see in everyday life. According to quantum physics principles, there is no reality until that reality is perceived. So this also, for those of you who saw that movie, What the Bleep. If you haven't, you can get that. It gives you a cartoon version of how you create reality, along with a story with characters and people acting things out that describe how our perception creates reality. This means that the world cannot simply exist independently from the means used to perceive the world. We call this the observer effect. The effect, long unsuspected in the physics before quantum physics, first came as a big surprise to the early scientists who discovered it. They saw, at times much to their dismay, that any time they attempted to perform an observation on an atomic or subatomic systems, the tools they used to make the observation appeared to introduce uncontrollable errors into their measurement. They were, as the adage pictures, bulls in the china shop when they attempted to take such refined measurements. However, they soon realized that it wasn't the tools that made the errors in their determinations, but that they had stumbled on a very stubborn part of nature herself. Like a mysterious fan dancer, she always kept part of herself hidden. But when asked to reveal herself, she demanded that each observation, regardless of the measuring tool employed, make its mark on the thing being observed in a completely irreversible and often unpredictable way. Whether they liked it or not, every observer ended up disturbing the thing he or she sought to look at. The observation went far beyond eyes alone and included any sense a human being used to observe, from listening to tones coming from an instrument such as a Geiger counter or watching dots on a flashing oscilloscope. Since anything revealed by observation depend on the observer's choices, nature demanded that we must be an integrated part of herself, even though our minds sought to believe that a natural and physical world existed objectively separated from us. So this is just, anytime you look at something, you've changed it by looking at it. That's just how energy operates. So make that personal. Anytime you look at your health, you're changing it by how you're looking at it. Anytime you're looking at your job or your relationships or the world outside of you, your very observation is having an effect on the thing you are looking at. This is, for people who study A Course in Miracles, this is all about how projection makes perception. That we are projecting onto things and then perceiving them through that projection. Because we usually don't pay attention to ourselves in the perception processes involved in observation, our immediate experience will not appear to show that our actions or perceptions changed anything. To our unsophisticated minds, it just seems we make errors. However, if we construct a careful history of our perceptions, they often show us that our way of perceiving indeed changes the course of our observations and even our personal history. Now, for those of you who study Stephen Covey, he talks about paradox shifts. So that's what, or paradigm shifts. That's what this is. When you shift your paradigm about something. The story that he tells that's very powerful in that book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is he's, I think, on a subway train, and he's by himself, and this man gets in, and this man has 3 sort of pretty raucous kids who are like probably all under the ages of 10, and they're just wreaking havoc in this car. And they're bothering other people, and he's not paying any attention to them at all. He's like totally off in a world by himself. And Stephen Covey is getting angrier and angrier because this guy is a horrible father. What is he doing? Like, these kids are savages. What's wrong with people nowadays? That's why the world is the way it is because people don't take care of each other, and da-da-da-da. And finally, Stephen Covey says to the man, you know, your kids are doing this and that and the other thing, and you should probably, like, do something about it. And the man says, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm kind of out of it. We just came from the hospital where their mother died. So immediately, Stephen Covey had a paradigm shift. He had seen, this is what's happening, this is the way I perceive it, so this is my reality. So he was having the visceral experience of that reality. So his visceral experience of that reality, it just tied into a whole worldview then. So his own irritation, first of all, what happens when you're irritated? Every thought that we think is having a chemical reaction in the cells of our body. You understand that? The brain is just a chemical factory. So every time you're thinking something, you might be dumping acid into your stomach, you might be creating cortisol, or there's all kinds of things that happen depending on your emotions. So Stephen Covey is sitting there in one unquestioned reality. See, this is why we studied Byron Katie, who's always about question your thoughts. Don't believe everything you think. Question your thoughts. So he's living in this worldview of I'm irritated and this is the way parents are nowadays and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I mean, you can spin off on this forever. Right? You can turn this whole into, this is the problem with America, it's like, right? You can just go and go and go. And if you haven't then, if he would not have had the conversation with that man, then that would have just, what? Gone into the file of evidence that solidifies this is the way life is now in America, period. This is the problem, so we need to fix the American family which is broken. We need to fix the system. Remember, A Course in Miracles says, seek not to change the world, choose to change your mind about the world because perception is a result, not a cause. You can change things out here forever, and you'll never get done. That's what Buddha came to tell us. He said, stop trying to find stability in what is decaying. This world is always forming and falling apart, forming and falling apart, forming and falling apart. That's why you suffer. You're trying to make something that is impermanent stable. You may go. That's basically the crux of everything. That's the crux of all reality, but I will go on. Further examination shows that by making different choices, not only would our perceptions of the outcomes change, but also the very things we were observing would also exhibit traits that would not have appeared had we not looked for them. Now, we're actually summoning through this consciousness. So you can call forth from people whatever you're focused on. You understand that? If you've decided somebody's an idiot, that's all you summon from them. They won't even know why they act that way around you. They'll be like, I don't understand. I'm like the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and I have thousands of employees, and I have da-da-da-da-da. And when I'm around my sister, I'm an idiot. Because your sister decided years ago that you're an idiot. And she summons it from you. And if you are not strong enough in your own perception of self, then you'll allow that to happen. You understand? Particularly if you're resisting it, it'll be worse. The more you try to not be an idiot, the more you demonstrate idiot. Right? Because you're focused on what? Idiot. Yeah. You got this. This may make sense to you when looking at something new and deciding what it means, but you may wonder, I'm not actually changing reality, am I? I'm just changing my interpretation of reality. The answer is often difficult to appreciate, but as surprising as it may seem, you are changing reality simply by observing it. In the world described successfully by quantum mechanics, ultimately and fundamentally, observers affect the universe whenever they observe it or anything in it. This is why Ernest Holmes would say, you know what I love about Ernest Holmes too, is that in the Science of My Text, I don't know if they do it in this book, in the Science of My Text, because he wrote the Science of My Text, if he wants to emphasize something, it'll just be all in capital letters, which of course now to us means shouting, you know, because that's what, when you send an email or something, it's all capital letters, it's shouting. So I always read it like he's shouting at us. So in the Science of My Text, one of the things that he says that of course people nowadays hate, but it's true, he says, you must turn entirely from the condition. People fucking hate that. But it's all kind of like, you must, when you don't want something, you must turn entirely away from that condition. People hate that and say, you're putting your head in the sand. Fuck yeah. Absolutely. Turn entirely away from that condition in order to focus entirely on the condition wanted. You focus entirely on the condition wanted. Okay. So this is what he's saying here. Everything we turn to feeds off our energy. Everything we turn to feeds off of our energy. That's why war is so hopeless. The war on poverty, the war on drugs. What I loved was watching Chelsea Handler did a series of like 3 or 4 documentaries that she did where she was curious about a subject, so she went around and talked to people about it, and drugs was one of them because Chelsea likes her drugs. So she wanted to talk to all these people about drugs. So she, I'm pretty sure this is where I saw it, so she actually talked to, or at least had a clip of, the dude, the actual guy, the government official from way back when who started the war on drugs, what became known as the war on drugs. And he said directly to the camera That was the worst possible thing we could have done. It has been a complete and total failure. Because anything you fight gets stronger from your energy fighting it. We'll get to that later, too. All right. Physicists' observations of nature taught us a new principle of physics exists in the world. As I simply put it in the principle states, what you see is what you expect. By choosing one way to see the world, another equally likely aspect of that world becomes hidden. Did you get that? By choosing one way to see the world, another equally likely aspect of that world becomes hidden. Now here's something that, this is how Marianne states this. She always says the Course says, but the Course doesn't say this. So if you think the Course says this, the Course describes this, but it doesn't say this. But this is a very good Marianne quote. The vision of one world costs you the vision of another. That's what this quote is basically saying. You cannot perceive two opposing worlds. The vision of one world costs you the vision of another world. So if you look at the world and say, well, the world is basically a dark and evil place, that's all you'll register. You will not register the kindnesses that are done, and if you ever see them, you will just think it's an anomaly. Well, probably someone did that out of self-interest. You understand? If you choose to see that the world is a friendly place, it's a loving place, that's the world you'll register. And if somebody does something awful, then you will say, well, obviously they were hurt, they were wounded, they were this, they were that. You don't register two worlds, certainly not at the same time. Now, this is why I wanted to read this whole thing, because I love the way he describes this. Physicists have carefully made a map of the way our expectations alter our perception of the world. They notice that there are always two complementary ways of seeing. Let me give you an everyday example. Suppose you are a student of music. Undoubtedly, you learn how to listen to music, particularly how to hear rhythms, motifs, or themes, and the notes that different instruments sound. While listening to a particular piece of music, you can find yourself listening to particular instruments, say the violins or the trumpets, and by focusing your mind, you pay attention to each note played and to the beat of the music. Or, if you wish, you can pay attention to the theme or the blending of the music into a whole. You find from your listening experiences that you cannot do both at the same time. In fact, paying attention to themes alters your ability to hear notes, while paying attention to notes alters your ability to hear the melodies. Get that? Our focus automatically eliminates other options that are not in alignment with that option. You get that? This is very fucking cool. If you decide that life is hard, then you automatically do not see opportunities for things to be easier for you. This is, I was thinking about, I don't know if I talked about this here or not, because I lecture at different places now, I forget. But did I read the letter that Frank Sinatra wrote to George Michael here last month? I don't think I have it with me anymore. But when George Michael died over the holidays, it reminded me of that back in the 90s, when Frank Sinatra was still around, and George Michael was writing all of this very, very dark music. And he had done this article that was on the cover of something where he talked about the horrible burden of fame. Now, what was interesting was in this article he had talked about from the time he was young, all he ever wanted to be was famous. And in fact, I remember seeing a documentary with him where he talked about once he signed with the record company, realizing that they had no idea how to even make him famous, and he had really done it all himself. He said, I just took control of my career because I saw that they didn't even know how to do this, so I just took over. So all he'd ever wanted his whole life was to be famous and to be rich, and once he achieved that, then all he wanted to do was get out of it. And so this whole interview was about the burden of fame and how horrible it was, and on and on and on, and so on and so forth. So Frank Sinatra, who also, you have to understand that Frank Sinatra became very famous like that, also probably at the same age George Michael did. So Frank Sinatra was only 20 or something years old when he became like, for his generation, he was like the fucking Beatles, right? Women screaming and tearing at his clothes and all this kind of stuff. And so he wrote a letter to George Michaels that he sent to whatever magazine this was published in. And so it was published. I thought I had it here. I don't. You can look it up on the internet. But it just basically was, Dear Everyone and George Michaels. And it basically said, hey, man, lighten up and swing. You should be having the time of your life. You're taking things too seriously. What the burden of fame is. And then he went on and said, here's what the burden is. The burden is coming to the club and you're singing to nobody but the lady who's mopping up the place because no one cares. And on and on about how you should just be so fucking grateful that anybody gives a shit about your music and that you get to do what you love to do and lighten up. This is great. It's basically what you make it and da-da-da-da-da. And of course, George Michael's response, was, he's an old man. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. And of course, we see what happened to George Michaels. And I was just listening to part of that album that was from that very dark period. I can't remember the name of the song, but it is all about the wonderful beauty of how I realize I need this pain. I want this pain, I need this pain because it reminds me of you and all this stuff. And so that worldview becomes an entire belief system that basically, I've often said, people are complicit in their own murder. And basically, he let a thought system murder him, as it does many, many people. Even if we look now, it's so interesting to see just the lies that we believe about the world and why we can or cannot be happy. It's so fascinating to me that while Obama was president, I never heard, and I loved Obama, and I thought he was great, but I never heard the word depression as much as I did over the last 8 years of people being depressed. People who were liberals who should have just been skippity-doo-dah down the street, happy from morning till fucking night. Because after all, things are the way I want them in the world. They're the way I want for women and for minorities and for gay people, so you should have just been happy all goddamn fucking day long. But people committing suicide, I know more people who committed suicide. I know more gay men who committed suicide since gay marriage was legalized than I ever knew in my life up to that point. Do you know that in a society that supposedly, the greatest thing to be in this society is a white man because you've got all the fucking doors open to you, right? It's the women that have a hard time. It's the gays, it's the transgenders, it's the people of color that have problems. Why is it that out of every 10 suicides in America, 7 of them are white men? It has nothing to fucking do with who the president is or whether they're at war or what the economy is. It has nothing to fucking do with any of that. It's your perception of life. That's it. You either decide to be happy or you don't. Abraham Lincoln, right? Had a pretty fucking shitty life, right? Had to start the whole Civil War. Had bone-crunching depression where he wouldn't get out of bed for weeks at a time, was famous for saying, a man is just about as happy as he makes up his mind to be. So over and over and over again, we keep thinking, if this were different, I'd be happy. If I just had more money. If there were just more closet space. Right? It doesn't even have to be something big. It could be something that minor that is enough to say, it's never easy for me. They're out of the salmon. I knew it! Right? But we act like, oh, this objective world out here is a certain way, and I guess I just have to adapt myself to it. Okay. So it's beginning to see that what I am focusing on, there's a wonderful section of the Course in Miracles that talks about this that says it's about goal setting. Now, the problem is a lot of us have secret goals. There are people right now, I absolutely can tell you this for a fact. There are people now who hope secretly that things get really horrible in this country so that they can be right about Donald Trump. If he does anything good, they're going to be so pissed. Because it will interfere with their belief system. And this is how Esther used to say, Esther Hicks, who channels Abraham, would talk about when she and Jerry were going somewhere, like before they had GPS, I guess, and they had different ideas about how to get somewhere, she would sometimes give in to Jerry and think, I hope we get lost. And then she realized, well, I'll be lost too. And she said, and then Esther realized that sometimes she would rather be right than have things go well. So if you have a secret goal, which is to be right, then a lot of times you'll stick to that even if you're right about something that hurts you. You understand? Sometimes we argue for our limitations, and then you stop and go, why am I arguing for this? Like you might argue about how I'm never going to find someone at this age. No one's ever going to want to marry me. And then you're arguing for that, and then you go, how's come I'm fucking arguing for that? Why am I arguing for things to go badly for me? And you don't realize that you have this secret goal about being right about something. So in this section in the course where it talks about goals, it says whatever your goal is, when the mind knows that you have a goal, it will begin to just focus on the things that are in alignment with that goal, and it says it will automatically delete anything that is out of alignment with that goal. It will just become invisible to the mind. So that means if you've decided someone's an asshole, then even when they act nicely, your mind will just invalidate it. It won't see their kindnesses. It will only see, I remember a woman writing me, and she kept saying about how her husband, she just felt like her husband didn't love her, but in these emails, she would also talk about things he had done. And I would always be like, that's so weird. Because in this email, she's saying he doesn't love her. He took me away for the weekend and to my favorite restaurant. And I just feel like he doesn't love me. And I'd be like, what the fuck? I don't understand. But like you decide certain things. And so then it doesn't matter. This is why A Course in Miracles says, this is good. You ready? No evidence will convince you of the truth of what you do not want. No evidence will convince you of the truth of what you do not want. So if you've decided someone is horrible, doesn't matter how much good they do, just wait. Just wait. You'll see how they really are. Right? The opposite is true also. If you've decided someone is wonderful, the whole world can tell you how awful that person is. And you'll go, well, I just don't see it that way. Well, you don't know what she's like when she's with me. She's a different person. Nobody sees the side of her, right? So why wouldn't we all just decide to think things that make us feel good instead of things that make us feel like shit, and then acting like those feelings were government issued? Well, this is the feelings I have. This is how we all, my mother felt this way, my grandmother felt this way, my great-grandmother felt this way. It's a family heirloom, depression. We all have it. Right? We pass it down from generation to generation. That's the thing. The sins of the fathers, are visited on. But you can change that. You can say, I am not heir to that. I'm heir to something else. Look at your parents and start to make lists of their positive aspects. You will then become the heir to that. Too many people are like, oh, well, I'm alcoholic because my parents were alcoholics. That's all they were? They were nothing else but a fucking alcoholic. They didn't have a job. They didn't have a hobby. They didn't have any interest. They didn't do anything. They didn't have no sense of humor. They had nothing. They just drank. They never even spoke to us. They just drank. Right? If you can find one tiny positive aspect and just focus entirely on that, then that's what you are heir to. Understand? That's what this is saying, is what you focus on is what you get. And what you focus on is what you expect. What you expect. So you want to start thinking about, what am I expecting for myself? Not just what do I want, what do I actually expect? And if your expectations are not high enough, start gently moving them and expecting more. Just expect things to go a little better today than they did yesterday. I have so many things to read to you, we may not get to any of it. Let me just finish this and then I'll go into another thing and another thing and another thing and another thing. Take another example. While you're speaking to someone, you most likely find yourself not paying attention to the individual words, consonants, or vowels you use while you focus on the meanings and nuances of your sentences. However, at times you find that you must stop speaking and momentarily search your memory for a particular word. Maybe you notice that once you find the word, you have to go back and reconstruct your sentence all over. This illustrates how a principle of complementarity exists in your thought processes. Probably the most astonishing fact that emerges from a quantum physical study of matter and energy is that a complementary way of our choices affects the results we do observe in a manner while similar to the examples shown above, yet somewhat different. In other words, what you choose to observe can not only nullify your ability to observe another different aspect, it can render it non-existent to you. The difference tells us that what you observe not only hides the other aspect from your sensory awareness, it renders it imaginary altogether. This is why siblings can get together and talk like they were from totally different families. You can grow up in the same house and talk as if you were in completely different households, and you always think the other one is just in fucking denial. Well, they're just in denial. Of course they're in denial. So are you. Everybody is in denial. Denial. See, denial's gotten a very bad rap when denial is fucking fabulous. Denial is your best fucking friend in many ways. And we're going to get to why. This is a huge, huge aspect of New Thought is positive denial. Did you know that? When you go in, if you come in and you take the classes here and they give you, Metaphysics 101, whatever it's called now, used to be Science of Mind 1, they will teach you prayer treatment. And prayer treatment will come down to basically denials and affirmations. Both of them. Not just affirmations, but denials. So you deny the opposite. So if you get any of my book, if you get Invocations or the Miracle Worker's Handbook that has all these treatments in it, you'll see both denials and affirmations in there. You'll see there's no lack in God, there's no pain in God, there's nothing holding me back. Those are denials. A Course in Miracles says that denial is a very powerful protective device. You can and should deny the power of anything of the world to hurt you. So it's not just affirmation, it's also denial. It's also negating things and saying, you have no power here. Be gone before someone drops a house on you too. All of these stories, you understand, are reminding us the psyche of what's true for us. Just as Jesus said, get thee behind me, Satan, the good witch said to the bad witch, be gone. You have no power here. Go before someone drops a house on you too. Right? So this is really the beginning. Let's go to this Ernest Holmes book on the Ernest Holmes Papers. Let me find that section. Because he talks about Quimby in here. Quimby said, I stand as a lawyer stands to his client. And he said, I enter the man of opinions, so to speak, and I represent the man of wisdom. And I explain that what is wrong are his opinions manifest, because matter is mind in form, and mind is matter in solution. Then he said that the thing will work like mathematics. That's how exacting. It works like fucking mathematics. It's a mathematical formula. I love that. That is where we got the idea of mathematical conclusion. It came from Quimby entirely, at least as an original concept. So Quimby was really the forerunner of all this stuff. So Phineas Quimby really was the person who gave rise to this whole mind over matter thing and self-healing thing that then went to Mary Baker Eddy, who founded Christian Science, and then from Mary Baker Eddy came Ernest Holmes and the people who started Unity, and all of that stuff came from that same basic place. But what did Quimby do? It's very simple. This is why, if you read A Course in Miracles after you've read Christian Science, it sounds like the same book. So if you read Mary Baker Eddy's Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, it reads just like A Course in Miracles, in that it says, how could there possibly be illness? If there's only what God created, how could God create anything opposite of God? Therefore, illness can't actually be a fact. Well, came because Quimby came in and talked people out of being sick. Do you understand what I'm saying? He would sit down with somebody. Well, I think in the beginning what he did was he had somebody who was hypnotized, who would diagnose people. So this guy would go into trance, and they would diagnose people's illnesses, and then Quimby would talk them out of being sick. How did he talk them out of being sick? Just the way Mary Baker Eddy did, just the way all of that, would say, if God is all there is and all there is God, how could God have created a sickness or an illness or anything that's against God? That would be God eating God. That can't be. So he would just talk to people until they would become convinced that their illness was just something the mind was creating that wasn't real, and they'd be healed. And then that's all that Mary Baker Eddy did. And she basically then created a church with practitioners. See, that's why it's that language. That's why it's medical language, because it was only done with healing then. It wasn't done about anything else. It was just healing people of physical ailments. It was not about prosperity or relationships or anything else. It was just focused on that. So it was all medical terminology. So just like you would have a medical practitioner, you had a metaphysical practitioner. Just as a nurse practitioner might give you a medical treatment, a metaphysical practitioner would give you a spiritual mind prayer treatment. That's why we call it treatment. We're treating the mind. You're never treating the body. That's why Ernest Holmes always says, the treatment never leaves the mind of the practitioner, because there's only one mind. So in that one mind, that's all Jesus ever did, and it's all based on Jesus. Everything that Ernest Holmes is talking about is based really on the teachings of Jesus. Bottom line, that Jesus would go in and not see you as sick, so then you weren't sick. If Jesus would have walked in and said, oh, how'd you get this? Do you feel like you caught this, or do you think that this is genetic? Like, does anyone else you know have it? Have you had it for a long time, or did you just get it? He didn't even care what the fuck you had. Just arise, take up your bed, and walk. Oh, thank you for healing me. I didn't heal you. Your faith has made you whole. It is done unto you as you believe. Ask believing that it is done, and it is done. It is all mind. There is nothing else but mind. Mind is everything. We're only ever changing our mind. And then mind manifests as this. Right? So he said, with Quimby, he said, I would go into the man of opinion. So the opinion was, something's wrong, I'm sick. And he would say, that's just an opinion. I'm going to stand as the man of wisdom, which is the fact is, you are radiant health itself. The opinion is, I'm poor. Well, that's bullshit, because the fact is infinite abundance. Consider the lilies of the field, consider the birds of the air. That's just an opinion. You're wrong. What's right is, everything is provided all the time, all the time, all the time. Right? This is it. You just keep coming back over and over and over again. You deny the world of appearances and opinion. This is why Jesus said, judge not according to appearances. The appearance is sickness. The appearance is poverty. The appearance is death. The appearance is loneliness. The appearance is this or that. But that's just an appearance. So don't live in the world in which you live according to the appearance. This is what Buddha again was saying is, why are you so concerned about the world of appearances? Appearances, by their very nature, come and go constantly. Right? Everything is mind. Everything is consciousness, consciousness, consciousness. There's never anything to change but consciousness. So again, this is why the Course says, seek not to change the world, but choose to change your mind about the world. All right? God, I love this shit. You'd think I just discovered this. I'm more excited about this than I was 30 fucking years ago. But I want to read this section here too. I haven't even gotten to my topic yet. So I better just say it in case we don't cover it. The topic today is let the stream do the work for you. So when we talked this morning in the meditation about that stream, you relax into that stream which is the infinite presence. That's all there is. See, when you learn treatment, when you learn in metaphysics, certainly in religious science, when you learn treatment, so often, I don't know if people, in classic treatment anyhow, you start out with, there's just God, that's it. There's just God, that's it. There's nothing opposing God. There is one power, one mind, one presence, and I'm one with that presence. That's it, that's where you start. That's really all you need to know, but that's the bottom line. Now that's really what all metaphysics is. This is why I love Joel Goldsmith, because Joel Goldsmith just fucking harangues you to the ends of the earth with, there are not two powers. There is nothing opposing the light. Darkness is just the absence of light. It's not a thing. It has no attributes of its own. It's just the absence of light. Light has qualities. Darkness has no qualities. It's not a thing. Light is a thing. There's nothing opposite to it. That's why the Course starts out that way. That's why the introduction to the Course is there's love and fear, except there's no such thing as fear, so really there's only love. That's why it says the Course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. So we've spent an eternity fighting unreal things. Talk about a fucking waste of time. Talk about fighting windmills. Stop fighting. This is why Abraham Hicks says there's only a stream of well-being. There's not a stream of sickness and a stream of well-being. There's only a stream of well-being. And you're either relaxing in the stream or resisting the stream. If you are standing in a fast-moving stream resisting it, it will feel like the stream is beating the fuck out of you. That's why this time in history is the best time to be alive if you're in alignment, and the worst time to be alive if you are not in alignment. Because if you're not in alignment, it will feel like the stream is beating the fuck out of you. You understand? Because you're not going with the flow of the stream. You're in resistance to it because you just have to make your point. But I just have to make this point, and I notice that. And the stream is going, right? Because we like things to be hard. It's like that George Michael song, I need this pain. When Jesus said, light came into the world and men preferred darkness. So it's recognizing where you're kind of drawn to the sadness. You're kind of drawn to the drama. You're kind of drawn to the pain. You want to talk about what's wrong. What's wrong? Right? So you start to notice that that's a tendency. It's just a mental habit pattern. And you can change that mental habit pattern a thought at a time. Just, I prefer to be happy. I want to go with the stream. I've talked before about Americans. It's so interesting because you see, like, you go to China or somewhere like that, and you'll see all these ancient 900-year-old people doing Tai Chi. Flowing, no arthritis, no pain, no high blood pressure, just the flow. In America, we're like, what the fuck is that bullshit? You come up here, and there's people, tractor tires, rolling tractor tires, because we're doing something, God damn it. We're doing something. This means something, right? Now, these people will all die of heart attack and stroke and, broken knees and bones and stuff, but we don't fucking go with the flow in America, right? The flow, eat the flow, right? Right, when you watch these people, they're 900 years old, out with the trees and right? We don't even, right? We have power yoga, turn up the fucking temperature to 900 degrees, sweat and smell like the dead in there, and shut the doors, and has to be hard because we earned it, right? But this whole philosophy is let the stream do the work. Why are you doing the work? Let the stream do the work. This is why Ernest Holmes would say, if you're treating and then working just as hard as you were before, you're wasting your time. If you're doing your treatment work and then you're just going back to working just as hard as you were before, something is wrong. Treatment is supposed to have results, right? It's not about you doing everything. So here's where, this is what I like. He reminds me of me when he talks. Adela Rogers St. John had dinner with me the other night, and she was speaking about spirituality. And I said, wait a minute, Adela, I don't know what you mean. She was all worked up over it, getting spiritual. And I told her, well, I don't know whether I'm spiritual or not. I feel like I'm very close to the earth. I love the things of the earth, but I can get along without them. Well, she said, spirituality is that which is not materialistic or material. And I said, there isn't any matter, Adela. Matter has been dissolved in the minds of thinkers for ages, and it hasn't even a peg to hang its hat on in modern physics. There is no material universe, therefore we don't have to contend with one. Where is a spiritual universe? Where you are looking, period. That's the end of the sentence and all of the lesson. Isn't it interesting? Don't try to be good. You don't know what good is, and I certainly don't. They didn't think Jesus was very good. Just be yourself. People act like the world. See, I love the world. One of the reasons that I pulled away more from the Course was because I don't agree with a lot of what the Course says. The Course says that the world is a horrible place. I think the world's fucking awesome. I love the world. There's nothing wrong with the world. If you don't like the world, it's you. You're the problem, not the world. It's because what you're focusing on and what you're seeing. The world is a lovely place. Do people do shitty stuff? Oh, all the time. So, that has nothing to do with the world. If you're registering all the shitty things that people are doing, it's because you're interested in it. Because you look for it and you are a vibrational match to the shitty stuff that people do. That's on your channel. Change channels. The world's a lovely, fabulous, amazing place. It's getting better all the time. The world's better than it's ever been in the history of humankind, ever, by a long, long, long shot. The world has never been as fucking fabulous as it is now. Ever. When people talk about the good old days, they're morons. The good old days, even not that long ago, were lots of women dying in childbirth, lots of children not making it to adulthood, the good old days of slavery. Do you know that even, the good old days, slavery and segregation, yeah, the good old days. Like, people are morons when they talk about the good old days. The good old days were not better. Every day is better. I was talking about, even in 1973, this is shocking to me, even though I lived through that time, that I remember when the original cast of Saturday Night Live was on Oprah, like during the last year that she was on. So this was just like 5 years ago or something. And Jane Curtin saying that in 1973 or 4, she was, right, one of the main stars of Saturday Night Live. She could not get a credit card in her name because she was a single woman. Don't you want the good old days? Wasn't it better and a sweeter and easier time back then? When all you need to do was marry somebody to take care of you the rest of your life and tell you what you could do and what you couldn't do, where you could go, where you couldn't go, and if you could buy this or charge that or not. Right? Things are getting better and better and better all the fucking time. But you have to pay attention to those things. And the real lesson here is, as he said, there's no such thing as a spiritual and a material universe. It's all one. Everything is spiritual. Do I have to say it again? From diamonds to dildos. All of it spiritual. You can take a crucifix and a Bible and sit them next to a diamond-encrusted dildo, and ain't one that's more spiritual than the other. There's no such thing as a holy or unholy thing. Everything is imbued with your perception of it. So if you see evil, you will see evil everywhere in everything. If you see good, you will see good in everything. This is this thing. Projection makes perception. What are you looking at? So as you are describing your life, if you don't like the way you're describing it, change the fucking script. I started teaching people, write actual scripts. Write a page of dialogue for you saying things you would love to be saying. Neville Goddard, there's a great process that I started to teach people to do that's a Neville Goddard process where you say, I remember when. And the way you do this is you say, I remember when. So if you're standing in a situation that is not to your liking, now remember, our part is not how. This is what's so great about this philosophy. Our part is not how, our part is the what. Our part is embodying the consciousness of the state desired. Get that? That's our part. Embodying, not thinking. This is the difference too with Neville and a lot of other people. He says you must think from the end, not of the end. Get that? So you think as if you're already there. That's why I always say, when you're visualizing yourself, never see yourself, because then you're thinking of it. If you're thinking from it, can you see yourself right now? No, you're seeing me. So you're thinking from the end, you better be seeing somebody or something else. If you're seeing yourself, you're not in the consciousness. You're watching it like a movie. It won't have any effect on you. It'll just be like, well, that would be nice. If you're in it, then you would be seeing who you'd be looking at, the site you would be seeing, the house that you would be living in, whatever it is, right? So I remember when is, let's say you're in a situation where you can't pay your rent this month, and you've just been let go from your job, and da-da-da-da-da. So then you would start saying things like, I remember when I didn't have money to pay the rent that time before I moved here into my dream house, which I paid cash for. I remember when I was worried about that test that said that I had cancer and what was going to happen. That was before, of course, they came with that wonderful treatment, and I only had like 2 weeks of treatment, and then I was completely healed, and I've been cancer-free for 5 years. I remember when I used to worry about da-da-da-da-da-da. That you are moving yourself all the time into what the state desired instead of the state not desired. Because most people are worried about what might happen, and that's the dialoguing they're doing. Right? Anybody in here had a fight with somebody in the car when they weren't there? Right? So you're imagining what they would say. So we're all very good at imagining people saying horrible shit to us. Well, what I'm suggesting is that you write down a page of people, not particular people though, just general, of people saying fabulous things to you. People saying like, I had to walk over here and tell you how handsome you are. At first I thought you were George Clooney. Right? Instead of thinking about going to the class reunion and having them saying, you certainly have gotten fat. Right? Because we imagine stuff like that. I remember, Tina Yothers from Family Ties. She was on that show, What Not to Wear, and where they come in and they basically do a makeover on you. So these two fashion people would come in. People turn you in for this. So your family and friends secretly tape you and turn you into this show, What Not to Wear, because they don't like what you're wearing. And they would give the footage to the show, and then they would sort of just ambush you somewhere in public and say, your friends have da-da-da, and here's a $5,000 credit card that you're going to use to buy a whole new wardrobe if you let us throw away all the clothes you have now and you use our rules of how to dress. So Tina Yothers did this, and it was so sad. I mean, it was so perfect because I did a series of talks then called What Not to Think, because that's really what it was about, was that she had gained weight when she'd had her children and she'd never been able to lose the weight, and so she felt like she didn't look good in anything. So she did what a lot of people did, which was she just wore tents all the time. And so that was all she had, were just like big tents, mostly big black tents. So she just had big black tents that she wore everywhere. And so, but when they were talking to her, what was so sad and so telling about what the mind does is they said to her, well, what about, because she there were events that she had to go to at the school for children, this and that and the other thing. And so she had basically become a semi-recluse. And so they said to her, well, what happens when there's something at school that you have to dress up for, if you have to go out for dinner? And she said, I just find a way to get out of it. And so she was more and more withdrawing from life and doing less and less and less based on what she thought other people were thinking about her. You understand? So what she was doing was, in her mind, having imaginary criticisms from people. They didn't even have a chance to criticize her because she wasn't going to go nowhere. But in her mind, she heard them saying horrible things about her. So let's not pretend that we have not all done that at some point about various things. So what I'm saying is, flip the fucking script. You're writing it. You wrote all those criticisms based on maybe something somebody once said. So now fill a sheet full of wonderful things that people say to you. And I'm going to tell you, it shouldn't surprise you. It shouldn't surprise me, but it does. People will start to fucking say exactly what you wrote on the script, sometimes verbatim, and you will think that you are being secretly fucking filmed. You'll be like, what the fuck? You'll look to see, did someone take the script? It's still here. You just said this fucking thing right now. You just said this. But we're writing the script for our lives every day. Most of us are writing a bad play. It's either boring or limiting or headed towards decline. Instead of, let's write a fabulous play. And be the star. You should be the star of your play. Too many people make somebody else the star of their fucking play. Like, I'm a tree. Just a tree over here. And somebody else's play. Be the star. You can have co-stars with equal billing, but you're the star of your play. You should write a play that you can't wait to act in. Again, Carrie Fisher, somebody who you are just complicit in your own death in so many ways. So many of the things that she wrote over the years, you could just see there was no other way for her life to end. There was no other way for her life to end. Those lines from Postcards from the Edge, where the character says, I narrate a life I'm reluctant to lead. You know you're narrating your life, right? You know that there's a narrator in your head that's narrating it, right? You're constantly, it's like a voiceover. There's a voiceover of the movie of your life that you're doing all the time. It's like, there's too much traffic now, like somebody's telling you like you wouldn't know. And oftentimes, it's like Carrie Fisher, they're narrating poorly. Like they're not telling it well. They're telling the story in the worst way possible. How dare you? Amy Schumer. You know, Amy Schumer is somebody who gets a lot of sort of what we call fat shaming now about the way that she looks and her body and stuff. And what I love about her and other people like her is that, I mean, of course it hurts their feelings at times, but by and large, she's pretty much just goes, I don't agree, so I don't really care. And she said, I love the way that she put it. I can't even remember where I saw her, where she said, you know, I get up and look in the mirror every day and go, I can work with this bitch. Like you just go, yeah, I can work with this. But too many times, we have a completely different narrator that's saying, oh God, this bitch. Like, where you're not excited about being this bitch. Like, you should be excited, like, I get to be this today. I get to be this. Like, tell it that way, and other people will get excited too. I have been hit on more in the last month than I would if you accumulated every time I'd been hit on it in the last preceding 50 years. Why? Because of the fucking script. People were not given the proper lines. You have to give the universe the lines. Give the universe the lines that you want to say and you want the co-stars to say to you. Now, you cannot choose particular people, right? You cannot say, I want that person to say this to me, because now you're fucking with people's free will. You just want people, just players. You can decide certain types of people, right? You can say, like, I want friendly, loving, generous people to say things like this. So you can decide on types of people, but not specific people. You don't get tied to, I need da-da-da-da-da. But just in general, I want people to say this. I was at lunch at Basics, where I have lunch every day, pretty much every day, and I was sitting at the bar because it was really crowded, and so I was tormenting all the people who work there because they all know me, so I was, teasing them and, like I do with you guys, just tormenting them and laughing, having a good time. And some woman came up to me, and I thought maybe she knew me from the lectures or something because she was really overly familiar, because she got, like, right close up in my fucking face, and she said, I just wanted to say that your laugh is so delightful. I don't know, it's like a giggle or it's like something, but it's just filled this place with so much joy, and it's just so wonderful to be here. And then she just walked away and sat down with her husband, and I was like, what the fuck? Because my laugh had gotten me in trouble most of my life. I mean, constantly at office jobs, in school, all the time, laughing too much. You're having too much fun. Sit down and shut up. My whole life. But I started changing the script. And when you start to change the script, that's what this means. Is that you are zooming in on, I am the creator of my reality. So I better start creating it. Don't be lazy about creating your reality. Keep creating your reality. What are the kinds? This is when I was here last month at doing this workshop for this sort of corporate gig, where I told the people as they were planning next year, I said, decide the kind of clients you want. Don't decide just how much money you want to make this year. Decide what kind of clients do you want to have? How many clients do you want to have? Like, these are a bunch of hairdressers. And I was like, just decide, and then get into the vibe and the conversation of that, of like, oh yeah, I have all these wonderful clients, and they love the work I do, and we're like friends, and they send me on vacations, and they send me presents, and they always over-tip me, and sometimes they pay double my fee, and get into it. Get the fuck into it. This is not a philosophy of just enough to get by. That's not what this is. This is a very practical philosophy of more than enough to share and to spare. That's what you want, more than enough to share. You know when I feel the most abundant of all? When I write my tithe check. Because then I know I'm living in the consciousness of more than enough to share and to spare. Not, just enough to eke by. When I write my tithe check, I feel fucking rich. If I spend $1,000 on a coat, then I think, well, I'm out that money. Hope I get the wear out of the coat. When I write a $1,000 tithe check, I'm like, I'm fucking playing. I must be abundant. Right? So that's how you want to live, is where you're like, I get better as I get older. The older I get, the more they want me. And the more they want me, the more I have to give. And the more I have to give, the more they want me. And the more they want me, the more I have to give. And the more I have to give, the more they want me. That you keep expanding your possibilities instead of thinking, I think it was Bob Proctor said, I'm just going to keep talking, Joel, so you can stop whenever you want to, because I think it was Bob Proctor when he was talking, because Bob Proctor is big on goal setting. Bob Proctor is one of the people from The Secret, the older guy who's really sort of kind of the most legitimate sort of dude who was in that thing. That's not a slam on anybody else, but he was sort of the most, you know what I mean. So one of the things that he said about goals is he said that most people are not really setting the goals of what they really want, but they're setting the goals of what they basically think is rational for them to expect. Right? Like, given how hard I'll have to work for this and my age and so on and so forth, in which case, what's the fucking point? Like, your goals shouldn't sound overwhelming to you. They shouldn't sound like a huge challenge to you. They should sound like a fucking blast to you. Like, they should excite you. If your goals don't excite you, I would suggest they're probably not your fucking goals. They're somebody else's goals that you've taken on. The culture's goals, your mother's goals, society's goals of what you should weigh, how much money you should have. Listen, just watch one episode of Susie Orman. if you want to see how fucking tormented you can be by somebody else's goals for you. Because she will tell you, you need $80 million minimum to make it through the next 2 years okay. Right? So you start to realize, like, are you taking on some expert's goals for you? Your goals should sound fun to you. They shouldn't sound stressful and horrifying and disturbing. And here's another thing. This is the horror of spirituality. Well, this is why I'm not spiritual. I'm post-spiritual. I like Ernest Holmes. He's not like, I'm not spiritual. I'm very down to earth. I'm just a normal person. That's what you want to be. Don't be spiritual. What a fucking bunch of, oh my God, seriously. The spiritual people are the meanest fucking bastards on the place. It's just the worst. And they love to fight more than anybody. I'll tell you, oh, they love to fight. The spiritual people who are about peace, they will just fucking fight over every fucking thing. So don't be spiritual. It just will ruin your whole fucking life. Just be normal, because this is all normal. This is not spiritual. This is what Ernest Holmes was saying. I'm just a normal person, and this is how life works. There's just this infinite flow. It's available to everybody, to atheists, to Christians, to everybody. It's just a flow. It's love and beneficence and goodness, and you can use it. Like, that was his whole thing, where he would start out and say, there's a power for good in the universe, and you can use it. There's a power for good in the universe, and you are using it. It's not that you can use it. You are using it, whether you know it or not. That's what we talk about. That's why Abraham would talk about the difference between deliberately creating and creating by default, because you're always creating. So one of the things that spiritual people do is they become too passive. So they'll say shit. There are lots of people who are talking Catholic stuff, where instead of just saying, this is what I want and this is what I'm going after, people will say, well, if it's God's will. That's Catholicism. God doesn't give two shits, because that guy doesn't exist. That guy on the cloud on a throne is a myth. There's no God that's saying, you have to be an accountant, and you get to be Mariah Carey. There's no such being. It's a myth. So you get to decide what you want to do and what you want to be and what you want to have. So where I came from, and what I'd like to see people moving back to, is making fucking bold statements about what you want without the slightest idea about how it could happen. If that's what you want, to be able to say, I've decided to buy a house for cash in West Hollywood. How dare you laugh at me? Do you know what I'm saying? That you start from the place of, that seems absolutely impossible and delightful. It sounds like so much fun that even if it doesn't happen, it's going to be a hilariously fun journey. Because you know who did that? Trump. Trump has boldly fucking said every single thing he was going to do with no idea how he would do any of it, and never once doubted or backed down. And that's everything you read in the Science of Mind text. In the whole section on faith, I usually, this time every year, I have what I call a faith feast, fear fast. And the section in the text on faith says that faith is those who have absolutely no doubt once they speak their word. That you just say it with no doubt. That you don't go, I hope. There's no hope in new thought. You can stick your hope up your ass for all the more good it will do you. Hope is a victim consciousness. Hope is victim conscious. If you have hope, you're in victim consciousness. And you cannot expect anything good to happen. There is no hope at all. I say it every month. You don't walk outside in the morning and go, hope gravity holds me down today. When you understand how law works, you don't doubt it. You don't think, what if there is no gravity tomorrow? I need to save up some gravity. Right? Or I think I'll renounce some of my gravity so that those people over there who don't have gravity can have some gravity. Right? You understand it's just a law, right? So our word is law. So that's all Donald Trump did. Now, as I've said before, you can create everything you want and have the life exactly that you choose and still be completely miserable and unhappy. And it seems to me that's how he is, more or less. I mean, he gets everything that he wants, but he doesn't seem to have any peace. He's not somebody who sleeps at night, he's tweeting at night. He's not sleeping, doesn't have any peace, there's no serenity, there's no the peace of God and an open, loving, defenseless heart. So, you understand? There's a difference between what you create and your character and how you live and feel the peace of God and all that kind of stuff. So, but we're just using him as an example of, if you're willing to say that, to boldly stand up in front of the world and say, this is what I'm going to do, when you have no qualifications, no whatever, that's what I'm suggesting. I mean, I'm not suggesting that you go do brain surgery today when you've had no experience. I'm talking about the things that are your dreams. Like if you want to travel to Paris, if you want to heal this disease, if you want to have a baby and you're 900 years old. Janet Jackson, hello. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like constantly the rules are being broken by somebody who is willing to have it be broken. To honestly say, that doesn't apply to me. See, what I'm teaching people now is, you know how there's diplomatic immunity? You have metaphysical immunity. You understand what that is? Metaphysical immunity, like a diplomat goes into a country and says, I'm not from here, so I'm not bound by the laws of this country. So that's what diplomatic immunity is. So you and I, we have metaphysical immunity. We're not from here, we're not bound by these laws. There's a lesson in A Course in Miracles that says, I am under no laws but God's. So you have metaphysical immunity, that means, I don't age like the humans do. Right? I don't have a war where I fight the visible signs of aging. You don't have to age like your parents. You don't have to age like anybody here because you're not bound by the laws of genetics and aging because you're from someplace else. Sylvia Browne, it's so interesting. The people who talk about the other side. Sylvia Browne always said, when you get to the other side, everyone's 30. I don't know where that came from. She's just like, everyone's 30. No, it doesn't matter if you were 107 when you died. On the other side, you're 30. So let's just be 30 here. Well, I'm from over there, so I'm 30. Let me read. I'm not even close to anywhere near winding this down. So if you have to go, you just go. I'm going to keep on going till I'm finished because I have so much to say to myself. This is from A Key to Yourself by Venice Bloodworth. I love this little book. Think yourself thin. Now, how many of you have ever seen, what's the Alfred Hitchcock movie with Cary Grant where they're trying to kill him? North by Northwest. So in North by Northwest, early on in North by Northwest, he's in the cab with his secretary, and he's sitting there looking fabulously Cary Grantish. And he says to his secretary, I don't know, this feels a little bit tight. I might have gained some weight. Make a note for me to think thin. I'm gonna think thin. So, think yourself thin. How I regained my normal weight after being 25 or 30 pounds overweight for 8 or 9 years. For a long time, psychology has been teaching us to think ourselves well if we are ill. For years, I endured a fistula, pleasant subject, and finally had an operation for it. I was only out of the hospital a few months until it returned. I doctored almost 2 years trying to cure it. Finally, I had another operation, and this time it did not return for more than a year. When I began having that intense pain in my back again, when my legs ached so that I could not walk up downstairs, when I became tired and listless, I knew the old trouble was there to struggle with again. I had almost made up my mind that I would have to go to the hospital once more when I read a set of books on practical psychology. I sincerely believed in psychology, and I made up my mind that I would cure myself this time. Overnight, the pain in my back disappeared. Very quickly, all the other symptoms followed, and I was well. Now I have no pain anywhere. I have plenty of pep. I never get tired. Do not think that it was easy to bring about this change. It was very hard to keep myself thinking well thoughts, to lose my doubts and fears. It was a great effort to visualize myself well. Just how I healed myself. I lay down several times a day, relaxed, and then concentrated my thoughts on the particular spot in which I knew the trouble was. I thought how it would feel when I was well. This is the difference. She was not fighting this condition. She was laying down and thinking how she would feel if that didn't exist. I faithfully, firmly believed that I could cure myself, and that is the reason I succeeded. I have a verse from the Bible pasted on the front of my desk, which I can see as I work. Therefore I say unto you, what things soever you desire, when you pray, believe that you receive them, and ye shall have them. I think it is the easiest understood, the most encouraging verse that one could remember. Now she goes into the weight. I was 25 or 30 pounds overweight. Now, if I could cure myself of illness by my faith and desire alone, why could I not get thin the same way? I had about 25 or 30 pounds. I'd been 25 or 35 pounds overweight for a period of 8 or 9 years. I had tried desperately to reduce, for I am not tall, and all excess weight is very noticeable. I said I had tried to reduce, and I had. I had eaten Wallace bread. This is an old book. I had eaten Wallace bread, had gone on a vegetable diet, had starved myself only to lose a pound or two, and immediately regained it again if I went on a normal diet. I had struggled on that way for years, never eating a bite of food without thinking, this will make me fat. This is what we call a terrible affirmation, okay? I want you to think about, now that we've stuck that in your mind, how many times you do something while having a terrible affirmation about it. I shouldn't be spending this money. I shouldn't be eating this. I shouldn't blah, 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 blah. You will now not think that without also thinking, this is a terrible affirmation. All right. I was always hungry and craved food of various kinds. I was always thinking about my meals. See, this is the other thing. We become obsessed with the problem. I was always thinking about my meals, and the more I thought, the hungrier I became. Of course. Everything, see, A Course in Miracles says, this is fascinating, that guilt actually attracts you. Guilt actually is what attracts us to something. So if we feel guilty about it, it actually becomes more attractive to us. That's why the Course says you must throw out the idea of sin entirely and replace it with the idea of mistake or error. And that's why in New Thought they tend to use the word error. The error, right? Because the Course in Miracles says people are attracted to guilt, but nobody is attracted to mistakes. And when you have guilt, guilt demands punishment. Errors require correction. Different, right? If you have a thought and you just think, oh, that's a terrible affirmation, that's an error, I'll just correct it. If you think that's a dark, sinful thought, you will punish yourself. Because sin deserves punishment. Error, you just want to be corrected. Oh, that's not the right thought. This is going to make me fat. What's the right thought? Well, she's going to tell us in a minute. Okay, listen. I could think of so many delectable foods which I dared not eat because they would add to my weight. I visioned fat growing on me and how I would soon look. After my bodily pain disappeared, one day I thought, why not use the same principle on this fat of mine? It seemed reasonable. I tried it. Today I'm a normal weight. I did not starve. I did not diet nor worry about my food. How? I got thin. After I made up my mind, I compelled myself to think thin thoughts instead of the fat ones I had been thinking for years. I began thinking myself slender, dreamed myself slender, and I ate what I wanted of any kind of food. I did not allow myself to think that it would make me fat. Instead, I said over and over to myself, I've just eaten a normal amount. I'm thinner today than I was yesterday. I've eaten a normal amount. I'm thinner today than I was yesterday. You can say that about anything. I'm richer today than I was yesterday. I'm more beloved today than I was yesterday. I'm hotter and sexier than I was yesterday. I'm smarter and wiser than I was yesterday. I'm more lovable and loving than I was yesterday. Anybody doing that already? Some of you? Were you saying this to yourself? I'm getting better, right? That's that old, every day in every way, I'm getting better and better and better. Every day in every way, I'm getting better and better and better. All right. I continued to think that earnestly, sincerely, and I really began to get thin. Not all at once. Each week I lost a pound and gradually more. This, again, not over the weekend. Okay? This is the problem with metaphysicians. I did that all day Saturday and Sunday. Nothing. Right? People will try an antidepressant for 2 years that never fucking worked and had horrible side effects. But they'll use an affirmation 2 days and go, this shit doesn't work. No affirmation gives you erectile dysfunction or suicidal thoughts. And yet people will only try this for a little while, but they'll try some medication for months and months and months that doesn't work, that has all these side effects. So you just start to think, am I willing to invest as much in this, which is fucking free, which is another reason why people won't do it. People think if it's free, it's not worth anything, right? If you were charged $10,000 an affirmation, it would fucking work over the weekend, because you'd make sure it did. Right? I continued to think that earnestly. Each week I lost a pound and gradually more. The wonderful part about it was, and still is, I do not crave food as I previously did. When I eat, I have a satisfied feeling for a normal length of time. Taking my thoughts off food, forgetting about it except at mealtime, and then eating without a thought as to whether it will make me fat or not, has killed that terrible, longing, hungry feeling. The strange thing about it all is I do eat less than I did when I tried hard to do without food, and I'm now satisfied and contented. The secret is my attitude of mind has changed. I now think thin thoughts. Well, I mean, that's the truth, right? It's a certain consciousness. Everything's a certain consciousness. Rich people think rich thoughts because that's their consciousness. But there's also your perception. So there are lots of thin people who think horrible thoughts, so they don't feel thin. There are people who weigh 90 pounds who feel fat, right? Just like, I've seen, the other one I was thinking of was Lena Dunham, somebody else who gets shamed about her body, and yet who doesn't agree with it. It hurts your feelings, of course, but less and less she pays attention to that, and so she's just like, I like my body the way it is. My body's great. What's wrong? I think it's great. Like, she's naked all the fucking time on that show, Girls. And so she has a thought that's different than the thought of the culture that she lives in. That's the thing, is so many people, oh my God. I mean, I feel like this is what I'm doing, what I've been doing for years and years and years in a lot of ways, is giving people permission, because that's so much all you really need is permission. To give yourself permission with no justification. You understand? To give yourself permission to live the life that you choose without justifying it to somebody. To let yourself be healthy and wealthy and loved and doing the career you want or whatever it is. To give yourself permission to do that without justifying it to anybody. Like, I remember when Martha Stewart was on Oprah early on. This was when we first really started to see a lot of Martha Stewart. It might have been like the first couple of years of her show, so it was like 2001 or something like that. And she had just bought some other house, and Oprah said to her, and they're standing there making something, and she's saying about, she bought this, or Oprah said to her about the other house that she had bought, and she said, I'm using it for TV shows and da-da-da-da. And Oprah said, I don't care how many houses you have. Like, Oprah's like, I have 6 houses myself. It's not really... You don't have to, But even Martha was like justifying this other house. Well, I'm using it for the da-da-da-da-da. Like, I have to justify having this much. I have to justify living this way. Look at the ways that you justify just taking up space on earth. You need no justification. This is where A Course in Miracles says, your worth is not established by teaching or learning. Your worth is established by God. Nothing you think or wish or make is necessary to establish your worth. So that means if you sat there in that chair for the rest of time and all eternity and never did one fucking thing, your value would be no more or less than somebody who discovered the cure to cancer, AIDS, tuberculosis, childhood, blah, 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 and all that. There'd be no difference in your worth whatsoever, period. Do you really understand that? That there's no difference in people like, I'm convinced I'm the best teacher on the fucking planet of this shit. I'm 100% totally convinced no one can hold a fucking candle to me. But I also know who the fuck cares. Do you understand? It doesn't make any difference if you're the best or the worst at what you're doing. All that really matters, see, your only success in life, get your pens out. Your only real barometer of success in life is your joy. That's it. Not how many people hear or see what you're doing, or what a difference you make in the world, or if you did this many things or that many things. The only real essence of your success is your joy in doing it. There may be people, the greatest singer in the fucking universe may be somebody who the only person who hears them is their husband in the kitchen. And somebody else has platinum albums and their music is all done auto-tune and they are the worst fucking singer in the world, but they've got millions and millions of fans. Doesn't mean anything. There's no difference in the value of the person. All that really matters is the joy. So that person who's traveling the world, if they're not enjoying their 10 million fans, that's kind of like what Frank Sinatra was saying to George Michael, is if you're not enjoying it, you should just get out of it all together because it's a ride. Because I remember him saying, swing, man, swing. Can you imagine Frank Sinatra saying that to George Michael, to dark, shrouded, disturbed, and then old Frank Sinatra going, swing, man, swing. Right? Two completely different experiences of the same basic thing. So success ultimately is your joy in doing something. That's why your goals should sound joyful to you. It should sound like, I would love to have that experience. That would just be amazing to just have that experience, just to have that experience, whatever it is. Some people, it's like, I don't know. I'm afraid that I'll never, ever stop talking. I'm just afraid I will never, ever stop talking. One of the things that we do is we want to go from tired to inspired. To go from tired to inspired happens when you change your paradigm. If you're tired, it usually has to do with the paradigm that you're living under in that particular area. One of the things when I started thinking about, I'd like to have a relationship, I want to start dating and getting into the process of all of that, I was exhausted. You know why I was exhausted? Because I thought, it's going to take up time and energy that I'm going to have to put into it, and this person's going to need attention, and I'm going to have to da-na-na-na, and blah, 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 and na-na-na-na. And then I realized, that's just a thought that I can turn around. So then what you do is you attract somebody who brings energy into your life. Well, how does somebody bring energy into your life? You're inspired. They don't bring the energy. You don't go, I'm going to feed off of your energy now. They come in and their presence inspires you so that you're not tired anymore. You understand? There are people, when you're with them for 15 minutes, you feel like you've aged a year. And see, this was my history in many different relationships, because what I would end up with was people who would just drain my energy. But that only happens if that's your paradigm. It's not the particular people, it's your paradigm about relationships. It's not that, how's come I keep attracting these people? No, it's how's come you keep writing that script? You change the script so that then you're attracting someone who because there's also people when you're in their presence, you feel like, I remember dating this guy once, this was way back in the 80s, and he said to me, we'd just known each other a little while, and he said, I've never met anyone like you before. And I was like, I've never been like this before. You know, have you ever been like that, where somebody brings something out of you that you've never experienced? The problem was, I thought, and I can't keep this up. And I didn't. Right? You know? So you don't want that. But what you want is that experience where aren't you sometimes with people where you just feel energized by them? There's a guy who, the guy who I actually went to the concert with last summer, my friend, who I talked about here, the first concert that I'd been in like 20 years. If I just spend like 15 minutes with him, I just feel like I can feel my cells humming. I can just feel like, because of the way he talks about his life. Because he enjoys like all the things that he's doing. So just what he's talking, we don't even talk about anything that's really particularly meaningful or anything. But he'll just talk about the music that he's making and where he's going and this, that, and the other thing. And I just feel like, it's like in that movie, Chariots of Fire, where the guy says, I feel God's joy when I run. That's what you want to feel God's joy in things. I always talk about how, I've seen lately that I talk about how I live like a house cat because I don't go anywhere that much and I lay around a lot. I lay around a lot. Like a cat. Like I don't even have a sofa or a chair anymore. I just have a king-size bed. That's it. If I'm not on the bed, I'm not at home. Nothing else to sit on. There's just the king-size bed. So I'm laying like a cat a lot of the time. And I was thinking the other day, like, about how I spend so much time laying around and I'll feel like, I don't feel this way, but if I feel like my mother's voice from a million years ago, I'll feel like I've wasted the day. Although mostly I try to waste the day. I get up in the morning and go, let's super enthusiastically waste the day. Because then you know you're going to enjoy it. When you're trying to make good use of the day, that's a horrible day. Okay? So I was thinking, and then I started to sort of go over it, and I was like, but you know what? I work 40 or more hours a week. It's just that I get up so early that my work is mostly from 5:30 in the morning till 10:30 in the morning. So then the whole rest of the day, I'm not working. But I do that 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Like there's 5 hours of work to do for me every single day. But I never think that because it doesn't feel like work to me. You know that saying where they say, if you find something that you love doing, you'll never work a day in your life? Like that's what I feel like. Like this will be a 12-hour day for me, basically, because I got up at 5 o'clock this morning, and I won't be done until 5 o'clock or so tonight by the time I drive back to LA and make the CDs and make the MP3s and send them out and answer the emails and all that stuff. This will be a 12-hour day. But it feels like, I went down there, and I just almost couldn't stop myself from fucking talking. They finally turned the lights off, and I decided to go. Right? I'll be excited about going home and making the CDs and sending them out to people, and I don't think about it like as work. Well, that's what you want your life to be like. So then I was like, well, that's what I want a relationship to be like. That you go from tired to inspired. You don't think, then I'm going to have to do this, and then I'm going to have to do that. There's a classic Mary Tyler Moore, maybe I'm almost done. There's a classic Mary Tyler Moore episode where Mary's depressed. And she doesn't even really know why. And it's so unlike Mary. And so Ted comes up to her and he says, Mary, I understand exactly what you're going through. I went through exactly the same thing once. It's just, I know how you feel. It's like you get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you comb your hair, you get in the car, you go to work, see your people there that you see every day, and do your job. Then you drive home, you eat your dinner, you watch some TV, and you go to bed, and it's just like that every day. And you just wonder when it's going to end. And she said, exactly. That's it, exactly. What did you do? He said, well, then I just decided I would get up and brush my teeth and comb my hair and get in the car and go to work and see my friends and do my job and then go home and have my dinner and go to bed. like that. She was like, what the fuck? But that was it. It was not this different thing. See, we always think, if I had a different life, if I had a different relationship, if I had a different body, if I had a different job. But it's really the script you're writing about it. That's what he was saying, is it's your attitude about it, your perception of it, what you're focusing on. It's the same things, but how you're focusing on it. So as I was focusing on relationship, the reason I didn't have one for so long was because in my mind, it was always a liability. And then I just said, well, I can take that same thing and make it an asset. But instead of thinking about what it's going to cost me in terms of time and energy and this and that can be just like my work. I can be just as excited about the energy that I'm putting into this relationship as I'm about the energy that I put into work and that I put into lunch and that I put into all these other things. But it is totally like her saying, think thin. I was eating this and saying, this is making me fat. Then I started eating this and saying, I'm getting thinner every day. So we can do that with everything. And what he's saying is, and what all this is saying is, whatever you decide, then you will automatically be sending into the background everything that's opposite of that. And what will come to the foreground is everything that's in alignment with that. So I really strongly encourage you to write a script for yourself of things that you would like to be saying in life. Oh yeah, I didn't realize I would be so good at being rich. I didn't know that I was going to be able to, enjoy vacations and having a wonderful home and feeding the poor and helping my relatives and my friends and whatever you do with it. Whatever you do with anything that make it a wonderful story instead of the story of, probably I'll get my mother's arthritis, my brother's diabetes, my sister's stroke. That's something that we just kind of in the back of our mind, instead of putting into the front of our mind, here's the direction I'm going in. This inspires me, this uplifts me, this is what I'm wanting. And then let the stream do the work. Don't start brainstorming about how you can make that happen now. Right? Your part is the visioning. Then you're on a need-to-know basis. The universe has you on a need-to-know basis so that you won't start fucking it up. So then you'll notice the right people start showing up. Opportunities start showing up. People start inviting you. People start noticing you. People come over and talk about your delightful laugh. Like all kinds of weird things start to happen. And then you go, more of that, more of that, more of that, more of that. Right? Can I just read one more thing? Do you mind? This is an Ernest Holmes thing that I love so freaking much. Okay. Now we know that a series of affirmations and denials will produce a result. That is a technique. We know that gradually the denials turn themselves into affirmations. That is better. That is recognition. We know that as the affirmations turn themselves into that indestructible state of consciousness which can no longer be analyzed, we have what we call a realization. I think a very wonderful example, if it is true, and I don't care whether it's true or not, it is good, is Jesus standing before the tomb of Lazarus. Father, I thank thee that thou hearest me. This is recognition. There is something, and I am in cooperation with it, my partner. This is the secret that I have with God, that I know that thou dost always hear me. No stuttering, no stammering. Here is a man who had learned that the universe responds to him, and he knew it. It embodies everything that is both faith and understanding in one category. And then he says, Lazarus, come on out. And then they had a party. Did you ever stop to think of that? I like parties. Now, Jesus was found at parties more than anywhere else. He wasn't a doleful, I was going to say Christian, but there weren't any Christians in his time. They had never been heard of. This terrible thing had not happened yet. Do you see how he is? Emerson said, for every Stoic there is a Stoic, but in Christendom, where's the Christian? Where's the man who would give his last shirt away? I haven't met him. He really liked to poke people with a stick like I do, and it is so fun. But I love that, to think Jesus loved to party and was found at more parties than any place else. Do you know who the most spiritual person was in that group? Judas. Judas was the most spiritual and serious of all of that group of people. He's the one that whenever the woman was using the expensive oil on Jesus' feet, she took her hair and used the expensive oil on Jesus' feet. Judas is the one who said, "Why did you let her do that? We could have sold that oil and given the money to the poor," because Judas was spiritual. And Jesus said, "It's my fucking party, Judas. Fuck off." But he said it nicer than I do. Because he knew Judas was spiritual, and Jesus was about, this is a cool place to be if you're not an asshole. Right? If you don't prefer darkness instead of light, you can have an awfully good time here. And he was basically saying, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. That's what he said to Judas. He said, you will always have the poor with you, but I will not always be here. I'm not here for a long time. I'm here for a good time. I'm going to teach you this shit and then get the fuck out while the getting's good. Right? And so you just think, oh, anytime you're party, you're like Jesus. Jesus would have said, go have the party. When you pass a poor person, give them your cloak. Give them some food. Give them what you have. Give them, and then move on with your life. You're not here to save anybody else. You're here to fulfill your own joy and being the light of the world. What a great fucking job. I could go on for 6 more hours, but instead, I'll come back next month. All right? Okay. Let's close this thing down here. Once again, we close our eyes. Take a deep breath. Relaxing into that stream of well-being, knowing it is the only stream there is. It is a stream of joy and peace and love, of limitless good, whatever you need, health and well-being, harmonious, loving relationships, wonderful, satisfying, joyful work, abundance and prosperity and money that just flows in, all the energy that you want to live your life as you choose, as you see fit. Relax into that stream and let the stream do all the work. Your part is to be the visionary. Your part is the what. So begin now in this moment to have a sincere but bold thought, a declaration for yourself, not what you think is big in terms of the world, not what you think the goals should be for someone like you, but something that is true in your own heart that you would like to manifest in your life or increase in your life. Don't keep it small if it doesn't feel right. What is it that you really want? Now know that it is possible for you. Your part is to believe and relax into the receptive mode, knowing that you will be led and guided to all the right people and places and circumstances as you keep telling the story, writing the script for yourself as you want it to play out, without limiting, without justifying. So we turn now to that power and presence which holds galaxies in place, the great something. And we surrender to it now, our visions. We release it now so that this, or something even better, for the highest good of all concerned, will begin in this very moment to unfold in beautiful and magical ways. We offer ourselves now to this infinite wisdom, offering it our hands and our feet and our voices as we ask, where would you have us go? What would you have us do and say, and to whom? We remember now, as always, the way that we will know love and the way that we will feel love is by this infinite love moving through us to the world around us. For this we are thankful, and together we all say, amen. You might want to stretch a minute. So remember, jacobglass.com has all the information about my lecture schedule, and if you want to get CDs or MP3s, all that information is on the website, or there are envelopes here if you want to mail in a donation to get a CD. They have my address on them, so you can just take them home. It's $25 per CD or MP3. That's it. Have a great, fabulous, wonderful weekend. Thank you for coming. Thank you.